Begin today the Gemara on Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis, second line up from the bottom of the Amud. Ve'ein Safik Moitzim Midei Vadai. So this is the middle of a sugya. The Gemara brought here the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish regarding an Avoda Zara of a guy that broke on its own. Will the Avoda Zara be bottled? So Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it's still Asr. The guy himself didn't break the Avoda Zara, he was never mevatel Avoda Zara, so it's still an Avoda Zara. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, if it breaks on its own, definitely the guy is not worshipping this Avoda Zara anymore. The guy says it can't help itself, it's going to help me. So it's going to be mutter. Okay. So then the Gemara, based on this, got into a discussion of Ein Safik Moitzi Midei Vadai. The Gemara brought the case where you have an Avoda Zara. It was definitely served as an Avoda Zara. And then it broke, and not as a Safik. Did the guy break it? Did it break on its own? So in such a case, Rabbi Yochanan said before that it's going to be asr even after it breaks. Why? Because ein safik moitzim midei vadai. We know that it was vadai and Avoda Zara. Now it's not clear how it broke. Did a guy break it or did it break on its own? You can't be matter something if it's a safik. Okay. So the Gemara now continues the discussion on this concept of ein safik moitzim midei vadai. And just one more thing to point out, I mentioned yesterday that Taisvis, the Rishonim here say that the concept of ein safik moitzim midei vadai that the Gemara is discussing over here is a safik that's cut of levadai, a safik haragil, when there's a kind of safik that it's to expect that this would happen, but it's still not definite. And the Gemara is questioning whether such a kind of safik, maybe it should have the ability to be moitzi from a vadai status. So the Gemara has another case that it asks on this. Can this kind of suffix not take out of a vadai status that there was? But Vatanya, we learned in the Braise, it says, there was a story with an individual that was a meitzik. Rashi says he was a yid, but he was this bully. That Berimain, he was living in a place called Rimain. She'etila neifol leboir. So this maid of this meitzik, so she miscarried, and she miscarried into a pit. And now it's not clear what kind of a baby this was. There's a difference lahalocha, whether it's a zachar or nekeva, regarding this woman that gave birth, whether she's tummy for 1 week or 2 weeks. And this is actually, as Taisus here points out, even regarding the shifcha. The halachas of tumah applies also by a shifcha kananis. And therefore what happened was, of Bak Kayin, a Kayin came along, and Rashi says this Kayin was a chacham, he was a meira hira, and he wanted to be able to paskin for this woman what level of tumah, how long she has to keep the tumah. Taisva says that this Kayin must have been a Kayin shaita, because a Kayin should not be looking over in such places where he can get tummy. And the hitzitz, he looked over this pit, Leida, to see im zachar im nekeva, whether it's a zachar or nekeva.
That's also how old is the neighbor.
Okay, what's up? That was see soon in the Gemara. And now this story came in front of the Chachamim. V'tiyaru, and the Chachamim actually said that this Kayin is tired. Why? If he bent over this pit and there's a navel inside, so his body's sort of like a oil, like a cover over this navel, he should become tummy. So the reason is, there's a weasel or a bardless, whatever this bardless is, similar to a weasel that's there, and therefore they definitely either ate up this navel or moved him into their hole, into a different place where the kind that will not become tummy.
Leopard-like beasts.
Okay, so, but there's always a discussion about what exactly the bardless is. A leopard is a pretty large creature into here. In this case, it doesn't really fit in 100%. Okay. Now, the Gemara asks, the vadai hitila neifel. Over here, it's a vadai. We know for a fact that this woman miscarried here in this pit. Now, safik garuru, safik loy garuru. The fact that we're relying on this weasel, that it pulled away this neifel, that's a safik. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Now, even if it's a suffix that it's more closer to vadai that it did, but it's still only a suffix, because the suffix might seem vadai, and this kind of suffix removes of the status of tumah that there is here from the nafel that we know definitely that was miscarried there. Okay, so the Gemara answers 2 answers here. One answer, the Gemara says, the story here was not that she miscarried into this pit. She miscarried at a stage of pregnancy that it's not even clear if it's actually a level of a baby that's born that there would be any tumah at all. So you don't even know. It's not a case of a vadai nefel, and now you're just trying to figure out whether it was still there or not. You don't even know b'chlal if it was a nefil on that, at that level where there would be any tumah. In fact, the Gemara but the Braisa says v'ha leida im zacher im nekevahu. It says that the Kaim just looked over to see if it was a zacher or nekeva, which sounds like that it was a baby that was born at the point where you could see if it's a zacher or nekeva. Says the Gemara, no, hachi ka'amar, this is how you have to read the Braisa. Leida, the Kaim was looking to see two things. Im ruach epila, im neifalitila, was this a miscarriage which is called just like a ruach, like a hot air, which means that it was still at such a stage where there's no toma here at all. And also, if it is a child that's a baby at a later stage, then if im neifalitila, or it was a neifel, and then you have to see if it's a zachar or nekeva. Sorry, the imtim tzleim and nefeli tila leida im zachar im nekeva. Then to see whether it was a zachar and nekeva. Therefore, this is a case of a suffix. And so the way Rashi puts it actually here is that it's a svek sveika. Right? You don't even know b'chlal if there was a nefel there, and even if there was, maybe the chulda took it away, and therefore, in such a case, there's no tumah for this kain. The same another answer here is kivin shechulda bardas mitzuyin sham. If there's a weasel there, vade. This is not a suffix. This is called avadai. We're talking about in those times in a location outdoors where there is a pit and there's definitely these weasels or different creatures that are outside. When they see a navel that's thrown to a pit, there's no question about it that they immediately come and take it away for themselves, and therefore it's avadai and avadai, and therefore there's no tumah for this kohen. Okay, now the Gemara gets back to the main subject that it was discussing here, which, as I mentioned, is the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish regarding Avoda Zara of a guy that broke on its own. Rabbi Yochanan says it's still aser, and Reish Lakish says that it broke on its own, the guy is not worshipping this anymore, and it's going to be mutter. So here the Gemara brings a bunch of questions that Rabbi Yochanan asked on Reish Lakish.
Who put the baby in the pit?
The mother. The mother.
So
yeah.
it had to be something
Lav dafka. Lav dafka. No, lav dafka. Lav dafka. Okay, so the Gemara here begins with a series of questions. So, Eisvei, Rabbi Yochanan asked Reish Lakish. It says, na braisa matzah, or actually this is going back to our Mishnah. The Mishnah before, it said, matzah tavnis yad, tavnis regel. If you find a hand from a statue, or a foot from a statue, so it seems like the Mishnah is talking about it was broken off, but harei lo asurim, but it's still going to be aser. Why? Never, because something like this could still be worshipped as an Avoda Zara. It's not. Rabbi Yochanan asks Reish Lakish, but amai? Why would it be aser? Hashvarim nino. It broke, and even if it broke on its own, according to Reish Lakish, any Avoda Zara that breaks on its own, automatically the guy says, the Avoda Zara can't protect itself. It's going to protect me, so it should be mutter. Answers the Gemara about Tirgum Shmuel. We already learned before on Daf Mem Aleph that Shmuel explained this, that Ba'im Den Al Basisam. We're talking about this hand or foot from this statue that is sitting on a pedestal or on a base, and therefore it's not like a broken piece. So therefore it still could be served as a proper Avoda Zara, and therefore it's still aser. Eisvei, another question. Rabbi Yochanan asked Reish Lakish. It says, Oive kechavim. This is later here in the Masechta. It says that a guy mevatel avodas kechavim shaloi. He has the ability to nullify his Avoda Zara. He'll break his Avoda Zara, so it's not Avoda Zara anymore. And Mishal Chavera, he can break his friend's Avoda Zara as well. However, the Yisrael, Einoi Mevatel, Avodas Gechavim Shalev Gechavim. A Yid, though, cannot, if a Yid goes ahead and breaks the Avoda Zara of a guy, it's not going to break the status of this Avoda Zara. A guy could do that, but when a Yid breaks it, it will not break the status of this Avoda Zara. That's the rule.
So what did they get accomplished when they had to break up Avoda Zara?
They completely demolished it. They pulverized it. They got rid of it completely. Here we're talking about breaking the Avoda Zara. It's not going to be mevatel the status of this Avoda Zara, and it'll still be aser ba'ana. Now the question though is, why if the Yid breaks this Avoda Zara, will it not be mevatel the Avoda Zara? According to Reish Lakish, to have it, kavedes kechavim shenishtabra me'aleh. There should be no less than a Avoda Zara that broke on its own, where the guy says my Avoda Zara is powerless. So when the Yid breaks it, it should be no less than that. So it should become batel. Amar Abaye, so Abaye answers, the case over here is shaposcha, that the Yid did not totally break this Avoda Zara. If it was totally broken, you're right, there would be no difference between the Yid and the guy. It's no less than if it broke on its own. But pascha means that he smashed it. He hit it with a hammer and he flattened the statue a little, misshaped it. That's what the Yid did. So in such a case, so since there's nothing missing from this Avoda Zara, it's not going to become bottle when the Yid does this. When the guy does it, it becomes bottle. The very fact that the guy is taking a hammer and smashing his Avoda Zara and flattens it a little bit, it shows that the guy is not worshipping it as an Avoda Zara. So therefore it'll become bottle. But now the Gemara asks on this answer, if he only flattened it and he did not break it completely, why is that any different? But Vatnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Pascha, if the guy smashes Avoda Zara, flattens it a little bit, misshapes it, Ava Bishale Chasra, even if he didn't break it, it is now a piece that fell off, Betela, it's bottled just like if he broke it. It's the same thing. Okay, so the Gemara says, yeah, true, answers the Gemara. There is Taka Mishnah that says that it's the same thing, but that's only when the guy does this. When the guy flattens it, then it's by a guy, it's the same like he broke it completely and it'll be bottle. Because whether he broke it completely, whether he just smashed it and flattened it a little, it shows clearly that the guy is not serving this as an Avoda Zara anymore. But if it's the Yid that's the one that flattened it, so then loy botla. Then this Avoda Zara will not become bottle. Why? Because over here, with a Yid cannot be mevatel Avoda Zara. And Rashi explains, you also can't say that it should be no less than if the Avoda Zara was bottle on its own, it broke on its own. Because in such a case, when the Avoda Zara breaks on its own, then I say, oh, the guy says, look, my Avoda Zara broke on its own, what good is my Avoda Zara? So the guy is not going to serve the Avoda Zara. But if the Avoda Zara did not break on its own, it just got flattened a little bit, the guy says, my Avoda Zara still has some benefit, my Avoda Zara is still useful. So therefore, in such a case, it's not going to become bottle when the Yid does this. This is Abai's answer. Rava says, La'olam, really, he disagrees with what Abai says here. Ki pachsa Yisrael nami botla. There's no distinction, even when the Yid goes and just flattens it a little. So there's no difference between whether he broke it completely or he just flattened it, it's the same thing. So if so why, in this case, shouldn't we apply the point that Ish Lakish said, that if it broke on its own, that it's not an Avoda Zara anymore, so if the Yid broke it, it should be no less than that. So why over here is it not going to be a bottle? So Ella, the Gemara says, the reason is, it's a Gzeira Midrabanan. Gzeira, there's a Gzeira here, Dilmim Magbala, maybe the Yid takes this Avoda Zara, and he's going to break this Avoda Zara. But what happens when the Yid takes the Avoda Zara to break it? He picks up the Avoda Zara. The moment he picks it up, he acquires this Avoda Zara, it becomes his. And if that's the case, so again, Magbala, he picks it up, and Vahada Mevatala, and then he's being Mevatalit. If so, Vahava Avedis Kechavim Biyad Yisrael, now it's an Avoda Zara which is owned by a Yid. Now the rule is an Avoda Zara that's owned by a Yid, V'chol Avedis Kechavim Biyad Yisrael, Ein B'Teila La'ilam. This is the rule. This is a new rule here, that Avoda Zara that's owned by a Yid, you can never be Mevatalit. Even a guy can't be Mevatalit. An Avoda Zara owned by a guy can be Mevatal, a Yid cannot be Mevatal. An Avoda Zara owned by a Yid, you can never be Mevatal this Avoda Zara. And this is all it's going to be learned out. The Gemara, this is later in the Masechta. Rashi brings the pasuk. It says, "V'som basasa." It's learned out that the only thing you can do with an Avoda Zara owned by a Yid is you have to be goyniz it. You have to either pulverize it completely or bury it in a place where no one has. So then you have no access to it. But the Avoda Zara itself, you can't be mevatel it. Even a guy cannot be mevatel the Avoda Zara. So right. So over here, there's a gzeira when the Yid picks up this Avoda Zara to break it. The moment he picks it up, the hagbah is a kinyan. So therefore, he won't be able to be mevatel it anymore.
Should just break it.
True, but there's a gzeira though that he may pick it up. Right? He may pick it up, and the moment he picks it up, now it's too late. He won't be able to break it anymore. So therefore, Chachamim said, even if he did not pick it up, even if he broke it, that the bittul should not take effect. That's the gzeira. Okay, so now here the Gemara continues with other shilas. Rabbi Yechanan asked, and it's all going to be the same point, the same answer. Eisvei Rabbi Yechanan asked Reish Lakish, Akom shehevi avanim min markulis, a guy that brought stones from the Avoda Zara called Markulis. Markulis is Avoda Zara. The way it's served is that they throw rocks at it. So there's a pile of rocks here in this Avoda Zara, and he took these stones and v'chipe ben drachim, and he paved a way with this, or v'tartiyos, or the tartiyos means usually a stadium, or another gersi is sratiyos, which means large ways, large highways. That if it's your great is sratiyos. So he used these stones to pave a street. Mutaris. So it's mutter to have an from this, because obviously the guy was mevatel Avoda Zara. He took the stones from the Avoda Zara and he paved the road with it. However, the Yisrael she'evi abanim and markulis v'chib ben drachim v'trat yois. If it's the Yid that did this, he brought these stones from the markulis and he paved the road with it, asurais. Then it's still going to be aser based on the rules that we said before. A Yid cannot be mevatel the Avoda Zara of a goy. But the question is, why is there such a distinction? Am I to have the kavedas gechavish and ishtabra me'aleh? It shouldn't be any less than Avoda Zara that broke on its own. And according to the Shlakish, that Avoda Zara is batal. Answers the Gemara, Hachanami, here as well, that true Minat Torah, the Yid could be mevatel this because it's no less than it being batal on its own, but kidder Rava. It's a gzeira of Rava that when the Yid lifts this up, he may then be kain it, and then he can't be mevatel it anymore. So the Gemara, as I mentioned, the Gemara is going to continue bringing here all these questions, the same question and the same answer again and again. Taisus here asks, Taisus says tzarichi, and why the Gemara keeps on bringing these questions again and again. Some of the Rishonim say that the reason the Gemara does this is because the Gemara is sort of inquiring, is there any other answer we could give to any of these questions besides Rava's answer? That's why it keeps on bringing it up again and again. Or other Rishonim say that all these questions that the Gemara brings here, it spells it out all separately, but really in the Bismedrish, all these questions were asked at the same time to Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan asked Reish Lakish, what's with this, and this Mishnah? All these Mishnayos that are saying that a Yid can't be Mevatel Avoda Zara, why not? It shouldn't be any less than if it broke on its own. That's why the Gemara is quoting what was said in the Bismedrish all at once.
How noticed this?
Yeah, it's all regarding the Hashayla of whether you can have a no from it.
Can drive in it?
If a guy took it and paved the road from the stones of Avoda Zara, no. Eis for the Sod Rabbi Yochanan asked a question from another Braise where it says, a guy that's coming and he has this Avoda Zara that's made from wood, and he's carving it or he's like fixing it. So if it's litzarchai, if it's for the sake of fixing the Avoda Zara itself, let me read that again. Litzarchai, if the guy is doing it for himself, meaning he wants to take a piece of the wood of the Avoda Zara for his own personal use. So then he v'shupiyah metarin. So then the Avoda Zara is not Avoda Zara anymore, and the pieces that he takes from it is mutter, because if he's using a piece from this wood from the Avoda Zara to cut it off for himself, obviously he's being mevatel the Avoda Zara. However, l'tzar ka, if it's for the sake of the Avoda Zara itself, that there's a piece that chipped and he wants to fix it, so then he asura, the Avoda Zara is still asur. He's fixing it. And v'shupiyah mutarin, the splinters of pieces of wood that he takes off, so he throws away in the garbage. So that's going to be mutter. Because that he was mevatel, he separated from the Avoda Zara. However, a Yid that is cutting off pieces from this Avoda Zara doesn't make a difference. Ben letzarchai, whether the Yid is doing it for himself, ben letzarcha, whether for the sake of the Avoda Zara, he v'shupueh asurin. It's always going to be aser. So the question is, why should it be aser? In this case, when the Yid is doing it for his own sake, which means he's trying to be breaking the Avoda Zara. So why should he not have the koyach to be mevatel this Avoda Zara? It should be no less than Avoda Zara that broke on its own. So the answer is the Gemara, Hachanami k'der Rava. The answer is like Rava, that it's a gzeira. Another question that Rabbi Yochanan asked Reish Lakish, and here actually the answer of Rava does not apply. So the Braisa says that Rabbi Yosi says, this is one more Braisa that Rava's question does apply. So Rabbi Yosi says, what do you do with Avoda Zara? A Yid finds Avoda Zara. Rashi says the case here is, let's say it's a piece of metal from an Avoda Zara. What do you do with this? Sheichik v'zeir l'ruach. So you should grind it, crush it, or pulverize it and throw it to the wind. Or matla yam, or throw it into the water. That's what you do with this Avoda Zara. So Amrullah, they said to Rabbi Yosi, but that's not enough, because if you throw it to the wind, af hi nas zevel, it could still be used as some kind of a quality for a fertilizer, and so you're still having hana from it. Uksev leyidbak biyotcha mu'uma menachedem. You should not have any hana at all from Avoda Zara, including even after you pulverize it, it could turn into fertilizer. But the question though is, why isn't this enough? If a guy does this, it's certainly bottled. But what Rabbi Yosi is saying is, if a Yid does this, it would also be enough. He's pulverizing it, and they asked Rabbi Yosi, but it could still be used. But if the Yid is doing this, crushing it and pulverizing it, there should be no less than Avoda Zara that broke on its own, that the guy is not serving it anymore, according to Reish Lakish. And says the Gemara, Hachanami kid Rava. Here as well, the answer is like Rava. Okay, here there's actually another Brisa where we have the Same question, sort of an answer that Rava gave. Eisvei, so the question of Yechanas Shlokish was, Rabbi Yosi ben Yassian Oimer, Rabbi Yosi ben Yassian says, Matzatzur is darkain. He finds a statue of a darkain, which is some kind of a snake, or they say dragon there? Okay, so it's like a dragon basically, yeah. And V'roishai chatuch, and its head is cut off. But now Safik Oivik Echavim Chatchai Safik Yisrael Chatchai. You don't know who cut off its head. A guy cut it off or Yid cut it off. So in such a case, mutter. It's going to be mutter because this is considered to be a svek sveike. Because this statue of this dragon, you don't even know if it was ever served as an Avoda Zara. And even if it was, there's another suffix. Possibly the guy cut off its head, so then the guy was mevatlet. Now, vadai Yisrael Chatchai, if you know for a fact that it's the Yid, the one that cut off its head, then also. Then it's also because the Yid cannot be mevatlet Avoda Zara. So the question again is, why is it this not going to work? It should be no less than Avoda Zara that broke on its own, and it's not going to be served as Avoda Zara anymore. And says Gemara Hachanami Kid Rava. This brisa as well is like Rava said that it's a gzeire not to be mevatel, that the Yid should not be mevatel Avoda Zara this way. Eisvei, so the Gemara asks from brisa where it says as follows. Here it's talking about a person who wants to plant under an ashera tree, and he wants to plant vegetables there, and he's going to comes out that he's using the benefit of the plants of the ashera tree for shade, for what he's planting under it. Right, so the Tanakama in that brisa, as Rashi brings, says that it depends if it's the summer or in the winter. In the summer, when it's very hot, so you need the shade from the tree, so you can't plant under the ashera tree. In the winter, though, where it's not hot and he doesn't need the shade from the tree, so he's not benefiting from the ashera, he can plant right under the tree. Now, Rabbi Yosi argues, so Rabbi Yosi Aimer, Af lo yirakis be meisak shamim. Even in the winter, you should not plant under the ashera tree, because there's leaves from the ashera tree that fall down onto the plants that you plant there. And what happens with those leaves? Those leaves disintegrate in the ground, and it becomes sort of like a fertilizer that's beneficial for the plants that you plant there. So even in the winter, it's an issue. Okay, but the Gemara asks, why should there be a problem with these leaves that are falling off the tree? Amai, why is there an issue here? According to Rish Lakish, this should be like an Avoda Zara that just broke on its own. The leaves that are falling from the tree are not anymore going to be served as an Avoda Zara. So even though no guy broke or tore off these leaves, but according to Rish Lakish, that's enough that the guy will not serve it, then it's not Avoda Zara anymore. And so the Gemara Shani Hasa, in that case of the Ashera tree, is different because the Iker Avodas Kechavim Kayemes. The tree itself, the tree is still there. The tree, the Ashera tree is the Avodah Zara, and it's still there. So then I say that even the leaves that are falling from it are still going to be Yasser. A Shlakish that said that an Avodah Zara that broke on its own is going to be Mutter, that's if the whole Avodah Zara broke. Not if the Iker of the Avodah Zara is still there. But if you're making such a kind of distinction, so now let's go back to one of the brises mentioned before, but shipuyin, that is, in the case where the person was carving and fixing the Avodah Zara, and it was wood, and he took off a piece of wood, so he was doing it for his own sake, and then it said that everything is going to be mutter. The Avodah Zara itself is totally bottle. Now the Ikar Avodas Kechavim Kayemes, the Avodah Zara itself is there. The Katani, and it says, L'tzarcha, if he's doing it for the sake of the Avodah Zara, he asura v'shipuyah mutarin. In the case of the tzarcha, when he was doing it for the sake of the Avodah Zara, he was trying to fix the Avodah Zara. What happens? The pieces of wood that come off are going to be mutter, because that he throws away. But the Avodah Zara itself is still aser. But the pieces that come off, why are they mutter? If the ikar of Avodah Zara is kayam, why should they be mutter? So Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua Omar, Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua says, so there's a different shot. Going back to the tree, the Ashera tree, there's a different shot. Why over here, when the leaves fall off of it, it's not a problem of Avodah Zara. Lefi she'ein Avodas Kechavim b'teila derech dilasa. And Avodah Zara does not become bottle if it's something that just happens naturally, that every year in fall time the leaves fall off, or during the winter the leaves fall off. So this is not something that happens that a guy is doing it to be mevatel Avodah Zara. The concept of bittul Avodah Zara is when either a guy was mevatel it, or even if it broke on its own. But over here, the leaves of a tree, that the way it grows, the seasons of the year that the leaves fall off, that there's no aspect of bittul Avodah Zara here at all. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yosi, you plant under this ashera tree and the leaves that are falling off, it's a problem. You're having enough from these leaves. now these are all the shilas that Rabbi Yochanan asked Reish Lakish from all these Braistas and Mishnahs. Now the Gemara brings the shilah that Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan. Eis v'Reb Shimon ben Lakish l'Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan. It says as follows: Kain sheberoi she'ilam. If you have a nest that's on the top of a tree, shel hektish, and this is a hektish tree that the person dedicated to hektish. Now there's the nest in that tree. What's the status of this nest? Is it part of the tree that it's aser, it's mutter? So loy there's you're not allowed to have anah from this nest in this tree, but at the same time though, v'loy moyelin. If you did have anah from it, there's not going to be any iser of me'ilah. So now the pshat simply here is, as Rashi says, that you're not allowed to have anah. It's only asim midrabanan to have anah from this. It's not like part of the tree itself, which is asim and atayre. That's hektish. It's a isim midrabanan, and therefore, if you did have anah, the halacha of me'ilah and atayre that requires to bring a carbon and so on will not apply. Now, if it's bereisha shel asheira, another case the Brisa says, or the Mishnah, if it's on the top of a asheira tree, you're also not allowed to have anah from the Avoda Zara, the asheira tree. So what's with this nest? Could you use this nest? So here it says yatiz bekane. You take a stick and you could kick off, or you can push off, or bring down the nest, and then you could have anah. You could use this nest. So what do you see from this? That the nest that's on the tree, this nest here, where did it come from? How is this nest created on this tree? So the Gemara explains. What was the question of Reish Lakish on Rabbi Yochanan? So Reish Lakish was thinking and to ask, Kagain sheshavra mimenu eitzim v'kinsa behen. The birds that made this nest, from where did they make this nest? They took little pieces of twigs from the tree itself, and they formed this nest on the tree. So which means that the actual nest of the tree comes from the Avoda Zara itself. The birds broke off pieces, twigs, branches from the tree and created this nest. And the Katani, what does it say here? That if a person wants to use this nest for himself, what does he do? He takes a stick and he brings it down, yatis bekone, he can bring down the nest and he can use the nest for himself. Why? Why could he use the nest for himself? So Reish Lakish says the reason is because the bird broke off pieces of wood from the tree and made this nest. If it broke off pieces from the Asherah tree, so then it's not part of the Avoda Zara anymore. It's bottled from that Avoda Zara and you can use it. According to Rabbi Yochanan, only when a guy is mevatel it, then it breaks the Avoda Zara. But if it breaks on its own, or a bird did it, it's not going to be bottled. So this is Reish Lakish's question. Rabbi Yochanan, here you see the birds make the nest from this Avoda Zara tree, and that nest is mutter to have an off from. Because even when it breaks on its own, or the bird broke it, the same thing, then it's not part of the Avoda Zara anymore. So the Gemara answers, that's not the story with this nest. Kagain, rather the case over here is the Isi Eitzim Me Alma. This nest that the bird made on this tree, it's wood that the bird brought from another place, and v'kinsaben, and it made this nest in this tree, but not from the pieces of wood of this tree, but from another place. Some Rishonim say that even if you don't know this for sure, but it's very possible that this is the case, and therefore we rely on this. Other Rishonim say it has to be dafka a case where you know for a fact that the bird created the nest from another place. Again? Well, it's an Asherah tree, so you know for a fact that it was an Asherah tree. If there's only a suffix, and l'chayr it's only one suffix. Okay, but now the Gemara proves this fact. How do we know, Take, that we're talking over here about a nest that the bird didn't necessarily make from this tree? Because I'll prove it to you from the first part of this Mishnah, where it speaks about the halacha of a tree that's hektish. Because the Tani, in the first part of the Mishnah, it says, Gabi hektish. That loy nanin, you can't have anah from this tree, but v'loy moyelin. Minatayna, there's no issue of meila. The question is, why not? If you're going to say that this nest is a nest that the bird created on this tree from another place, so therefore it says by hektish that there's no, shouldn't have anah, which means chachamim wa geyser. Chachamim wa geyser, that although it's taken not part of this tree, but because it's in the tree, if you're going to have anah from the nest, you may come to have anah from the tree itself. But v'loy moyelin, there's no meila because it's not from the tree itself. So as the Gemara explains, loy nanim midrabanan, it's exerim midrabanan, v'loy moyelin midraisa. The haloi kadeshi, because menatayre, it's a nest that wasn't created from the tree itself, so it's not hektish. But if you're going to say that the bird broke off pieces of twigs from the tree itself, the kinsa behen, and that's how it made this nest, why in the Reisha of this Mishnah, when it speaks about Me'ilah, why should there be no Isser of Me'ilah Minat Torah? HaKadeshi. It broke it off from the tree itself, so this is complete pure hektish. That's the Shaila over here. So this proves that it has to be that it made the nest from another place, not from the tree itself. So actually, what this ends up meaning is that if you can prove this from the Lashon of the Mishnah, from the first case, from the case of Hektish, then that would mean, what's if the nest was created from the tree itself? Then, in such a case, you would not be allowed to have Hana from this nest if it was from an Asheda tree. So that's actually a question on the Shlakish. Why shouldn't you be allowed to have Hana? Once the bird makes this nest, it broke the Avoda Zara. It's like it broke on its own. You should be allowed to have Hana from this. So the Gemara says, midi area, this svara that you just said, that you proved that the pshat over here is that the nest was dafka created from another place and not from the tree itself. Is this a proof? It's not a proof that this is the pshat here. And it won't be a question on Reish Lakish. Why? Because hacha, over here, even if the bird made the nest from this tree itself, still regarding hektish, there won't be a isra of me'ilah. Why not? Because hacha, bigidulin, haboen, la'acham, nikan, askinon. Here, we're talking about a tree that a person is makdish, and then the tree grows, and the tree there's what grows after he's makdish it. And the Kosova, the Tana of this Mishnah holds, ein me'ile begidulin, that the halacha of me'ile does not apply to what grows afterwards. It's actually a machlokes in Masechta me'ile, whether what grows on a tree after you makdish it, is it part of the hektish or not. The Tana of this brayse, of this Mishnah, that it holds that there's no me'ilah for what grows afterwards, and therefore it's only asim d'Rabbanan, but there's no me'ilah minat Torah. So therefore it could still be a case where the nest was made from the tree itself, and in the Reisha of the Mishnah it's saying that there's no me'ilah minat Torah. In the Sefer it's saying that this is Avoda Zara. And if it's Avoda Zara, when the bird makes the nest, according to Reish Lakish, that's a bittul of the Avoda Zara. It's like broke on its own, and therefore you're allowed to have Hana from this nest. So this Mishnah can go both ways. You could explain it like Rabbi Yechanan, you could explain it like Reish Lakish. Another pshat.
Hana can also mean you can do the mitzvah shluch hakan
with these eggs. Well, chayre, yeah. Rabavo Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabavo said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan himself to answer his opinion from this brayse. He says that the pshat in this brayse is different. Again, the point here that Reish Lakish's question was that here you see it says in the brayse you could have a nor from the nest, even though the nest a guy didn't break it. The bird broke it. The bird made the nest from the tree, but you see that when the bird makes it, you can have a nor from the nest. That was a question of Rabbi Yechanan, that l'chayre a guy has to break the Avoda Zara. So Rabbi Yechanan answers, my yatiz befreichen. When it says over that you can have a nor from it, you actually cannot have a nor from the nest itself, which has the twigs from the tree itself, because a guy was never mevatel this from Avoda Zara. It's referring to the chicks. You can take a stick and bring down the nest, and then the chicks that are there, you could have a nor from them. That's what it's talking about. But from the nest itself, you cannot have a nor, because that comes from the tree itself, which is going to still be an Avoda Zara. That's a pshat according to Rabbi Yechanan. So Rashi explains, according to this, that if so, the difference between the first part of this Mishnah and the second part, the first part where it speaks about hektish, and the second part where it speaks about an ashera, really the difference between the two is not that first it's hektish and the second is ashera. The difference between the reisha and the sefer of this Mishnah is, in the first part of the Mishnah, it's talking about the branches itself, the nest itself. And the nest itself will be asim d'Rabbanan to be moil from it, because we're talking here about what grew afterwards, and it's asim d'Rabbanan. And the same thing also, according to Rabbi Yechanan, it'll be also from Avoda Zara, because no one was ever mevatel this, only the bird was mevatel it. And the Sefer is speaking about the birds. And the birds, it'll be the same halacha, whether hektish, whether Avoda Zara, the birds you're allowed to have an from, even by hektish. The birds are not part of what the person was makdish. So the distinction between the Reish and the Sefer also changes according to this answer of Rabbi Yechanan. Now the Gemara qualifies this point. Amalei Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlife, Asber alach. I'll explain to you when we say that you can use the chicks that are on this tree, whether it's an Avoda Zara tree, whether a hektish tree. Kan v'kan, by both, again, befroichen kan v'kan. If it's the chicks, whether it's from hektish or nasheda mutar, that's going to be a lot because that's not part of the tree at all. But bebeitzim, if it's eggs that are in a nest, kan v'kan asurim. Then by both from a hektish or from a Avoda Zara, you cannot use it, and the reason is because they need the tree. They rely on the tree as a base for the place of where these beitzim have to be in order to be safe there and then to hatch. Therefore, that's still like belongs in the tree, or that it's using the tree, so therefore you can't have enough from it. Ravashi adds to this, if it's chicks that are very young and they still need their mother, they're not flying away, they're like the eggs that still need the tree itself, and you cannot have enough from it, but whether it's hektish, whether it's Avoda Zara. Let's continue. A person finds vessels. And on these vessels he sees tzuras chama, a shape of a sun, tzuras levana, shape of a moon. Actually, if you look into the Lashon of Rashi here, it's mashma, we're not just talking about a simple shape of a sun or a moon, but Rashi says a mazel of the sun, or the mazel of the levana, which is some kind of shape that Avoda Zara made in connection to the sun and the moon. Or tzuras darkain, it's mentioned before, the tzura of this darkain, which is translated as dragon. Rashi says that later that this darkain is some kind of a nochash. The Gemara will talk about it actually. So these are all signs that this is kalim that was made for Avoda Zara, and therefore yelicham leyama melach. You have to take them and throw them into the yama melach. They're aser b'hano. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Sha'ala mechubad masurim. If this is expensive kalim, so then that's aser. You know it was made for Avoda Zara. But Sha'ala mavuzin, but if it's on very cheap dishes, then mutarim. Then it'll be a lot, even if it has these shapes on it, because it's not made for Avoda Zara. So the Gemara asks, Lememre, shall we say the lahanihu the palchiluhu, that only these things mentioned in the Mishnah, 3 things: sun, the moon, and the darkain. Only these things, these 3 things, the goyim will worship as an Avoda Zara. Lemidi achrin aloi. But for other things that they will not worship as an Avoda Zara. But I'll ask you from what it says. Hasheichet l'shum, a person that shechts. And he's shechting for, here the Bach adds in what you see over here from Rashi that you have to add in. He's shechts l'shum harim, for mountains, serving mountains, or l'shum gvois, hills, or l'shum yamim, water, the oceans, l'shum nares, rivers, l'shum midbar, deserts, or midbares, l'shum chama, for the sun, l'shum levana, the moon, l'shum kechavim, stars, or mazalis, constellations, l'shum mechal, sara gadol, or for malach mechal, l'shum shul cotton. Or even shechting for an Avoda Zara that he's serving, which is a small little worm. All of this is going to be a sacrifice that was shechted now for Avoda Zara, and it'll be aser to have hana from this. So we see that there's much more than the 3 things that is mentioned here in our Mishnah. Okay, now in Rashi over here it mentions, when it says harim, Rashi here clarifies that it's the sar hamamuna ala harim. Something interesting Rashi holds about this, that if it's shechted for the mountain, it's not necessarily going to be a iser, but it has to be for the sar, that's munah, the minister, the ministering angel of this mountain. That was their Avoda Zara. Kapanim, you see here that's much more than what it says than in the Mishnah. Abaye explains, miflach l'chol mishkachi palchi. A guy will serve an Avoda Zara for whatever, all kinds of things that he finds. But mneitzer umiflachi, but to make these pictures and then to serve, is hanit lasi. It's only these 3, the chashivi, that is more significant of Avoda Zara. Tzairi lohu opalchi lohu. There, they will go out of their way and make these images connected to these 3 Avoda Zaras, and they'll worship this. But lemidi achrine, for anything else, lenoi ba'alme avdiluhu. It's usually just made for beauty, for decorative purposes. It's not necessarily made for an Avoda Zara. Even though it's possible that after it was made for decorative purposes, it'll then be used for Avoda Zara, because a guy will use anything for Avoda Zara, but lav dafka. It's a suffix. It's very possible that it was just made as dishes with decorations on it, and it's not necessarily for Avoda Zara. However, these 3 things is something which is significant, and that we know that a guy usually makes for Avoda Zara. So the Gemara now brings here a braisa that there was a question here on this braisa. The Gemara will explain. Mankit Rav Sheishes Chumri Masnaisa. Rav Sheishes had a braisa that was difficult to explain, and Vitani, and he taught the braisa which says as follows. Okay, so Chumri actually means a few braisas. I think that's the title of the word Chumri. Chumri means He had a few mishnayos, or Rashi actually says mishnayos achamurais. It means he had certain brises that he had a hard time explaining. And here, this is one of the brises. So Vitani, he learned as follows. The brisa says, Kol hamazalois mutarin. All kinds of constellations are allowed. Chutz mimazal chama ulovana. Besides, if it's the sun and the moon. Then that's the first case. Second case, v'chola partzufin mutarin. All images are allowed. Chutz mi parts of Adam. Besides the image of a human being. V'chola tzurais. The third case now is v'chola tzurais mutarais. All different shapes and sizes of statues are allowed. Chutz, or pictures rather, pictures that I made are allowed. Chutz mitzuras darkain. Besides the picture of this darkain. That's the three different cases that this brisa says. So what is this brisa talking about? What is it saying? So this is Rav Ashi had a hard time explaining this brisa. So now Amamah, the Tana in this brisa said, the first case was Kol hamazolos mutarin, all constellations are allowed, chutz mimazal chama ulavana, unless it's the sun or the moon. So what is this brisa talking about in this first case over here? So hacha b'may askinon, what is the case, or this brisa, or b'may askinon, what is the case of this brisa talking about? Ileime ba'oise, are we talking about a person that's making these different shapes and forms? So here actually the Gemara brings in that besides the Isser of Avoda Zara, to have Anah, we're talking about something else. Maybe the beginning of this Bryce is talking about Ba'oise. Now, that means that he makes these shapes and things. Now, Ba'oise, Kala Mazalis Mishari. Not only the sun and the moon, any mazalis, you're not allowed to make these shapes, these statues of them. Because Vaksiv, the Pasuk says, Leisasun iti. And when we learn from this, Leisasun kidumus shamashaiamishamshum lefane b'amarim. You're not allowed to make these statues of any of these different constellations, any kind of star, anything that there is in heaven. So therefore, Elapshita, it must be, when it says there in the first part of this Braise, that it's only the star, it's only the moon and the sun, the Maitze. It's talking about the case that we talked about in our Mishnah. Like it said in our Mishnah, a person finds a vessel that has a picture on it. As the Mishnah said, HaMaitze, Kalim, Valeim, Tzuras Chama, Tzuras Levanet, Tzuras Darkain. You find a Kalim that has these images on it, Yelichel Yam Melech, it'll be Aser. So the Mishnah mentioned only from the sun and the moon, not other things, as the Gemara explained before. Other pictures are not as chashiv, and the guy will not make them for Avoda Zara necessarily. Okay, now going to the next case of what it says in the Braise. So now, but Ibn Maitze, if that's what the first case of this Braise is speaking about, how about the second case? The middle case of the Braise is, Kala partzufais mutarin, all images are allowed, chutz mi parts of Adam, besides the parts of a human being. Okay, so now, what does this mean? When it says here parts of Adam, why are we saying that this will be Aser? Ibn Maitze, parts of Adam, if a person is finding a keli that has the image of the face of a person, mi aser, is this going to be aser? But Vatanan, the Mishnah said, Hamaitze kelim aleim, tzuras chama, v'tzuras levana, v'tzuras darkin, yelichem yama melach. The Mishnah said only the picture, these three pictures, tzuras darkin in parts of Adam loy. If it's the image of a darkin, that will be aser, but the image of a person will not be aser. So what's the pshat in the middle case of this braise? So el pshita, it must be ba'oise. It's talking there about a person that's making this statue or this image of this person. And like going back to what Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yeshua said before, that you're not allowed to make any dumus that's kedmus shamosha meshamshel lefane b'amarim, which refers also to the dumus of a person. The dumus of a person is tzelem elikim, also adam. A person is like the Eibishter, and therefore you can't make this the dumus of a person. But of any other animals, Rashi here brings from the dumus of the other chayes and behemoths, you're allowed to make only if you make from the Shor, Aryeh, Nesher, which are all together. They're all from the Merkava that are together, that you're not allowed to make, but from each one separately, you're allowed to make. So that's the middle case of this Braise. Now the Gemara goes back to the last case of the Braise. Now, if the middle case of the Braise is speaking about a case where a person is making this, and not regarding having a no, but he's making this demos, but not a sefer. What's the last case of the Braisa? Kol hatzuras mutaris. It says any images are allowed. Chutz mitzuras darken. Only the tzura of the darken is not allowed. Now if over here it's speaking about a person that's making this image, tzuras darken be aser. Person that makes the image of this dragon will be aser. But vaksiv leisasniti lechei kesav lechei zav, which means hani in Tzuras darka in light. Going back to what it said before, that it has to be only a kind of an image which is shamashim in front of the Eibishter b'marim. the images that there are from the stars, the sun and the moon, or the image of a person, but the image of a dragon, there's no issur at all that a person should make this. So Ella, the Gemara says, hey, let's finish the Indian. The Gemara says, Ella pshite b'maitze. So the last case of the Braisa is going back to what it said in the Mishnah. Person is not making any image. He found a vessel that has the image on it. Like it said in the Mishnah, maitze kelim, valeim tzuras chama, and then the Mishnah went on to say, it has a tzura of a darken as well, will be aser. So now the Gemara concludes, this was the problem that Rav Sheshes had with this Braisa. Reisha v'seifa b'maitze. The first case and the last case in this Braisa must be speaking about the halacha of a person finding a vessel with an image on it. Umitziyasa, but in the middle case is ba'isa. It's speaking about a person that is making this, and it's saying if he makes the image of a adam, a part of an adam, it will be aser. So it's a very difficult Braisa. Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, yeah, that's actually the pshat in the Braisa. In Reisha, V'Seifa, B'Maitze, the first and last case of the Braisa is where he's finding a vessel with an image on it. Umitziyasa Baisa, the middle case is where a person is making this. However, Rava says, Kula B'Maitze. I can tell you the entire Braisa is speaking about a person that finds a vessel with an image on it, and it's speaking about this vessel that would not be Asr B'Hana. Now, Umitziyasa, the middle case of the Braisa, so the Gemara asks, the image of a person on a vessel should not be Asr. That's not one of the images mentioned in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara Rabbi Yehuda, this Braisa is like what Rabbi Yehuda said. The Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, Rabbi Yehuda, Moisef, Av, Dumus, Minika, that there's another kind of image that we know it's of Avoda Zara. If there's an image of a woman that's nursing a baby, or Visar Apyas. Visar Apyas means, Sar actually means a minister, like with a Sar, with a sin, a minister. The Gemara explains, Menika, what's this images? The image of a mother that's nursing Al Shem Chava. This is the image of Avoda Zara that's making an image of Chava Shemenika Kol Olam Kula, that she nurses the entire world, and therefore that's an Avoda Zara. Sar Apyas is Al Shem Yosef. This is actually an Avoda Zara of Yosef that served the entire world. Sar with the samach is like Sar with the sin, and that refers to Yosef, that was a minister. That Shasar or Mephis is called La'ilam Kula, that he appeased the entire world and served the entire world at the time of hunger. So therefore, these are the images that the Braisa here meant, the image of a human being in these shapes. And there, the Gemara says, "V'hu denaked grive v'kakayel." When it's making this image of Yosef as a servant that serves, it's only if he's holding a certain measure of food and he's serving people. And the nokta ben the kamanika, and the image of the nursing mother is only if it's an image of a nursing mother that's holding a baby and nursing a baby. And therefore, the entire Braisa is speaking about a person not having a nor from Kalim that he finds. And here, this is Rabbi Yehuda in a Braisa that said even these kind of images of a human being will also be Asr.